You're watching the Sunbeam Alpine channel. This channel is a video workshop manual for the Alpine. It's run for the benefit of all Alpine owners. So hopefully you'll subscribe to the channel and like our videos. Now today, we're not in Oily Puddle's garage. We're in Trevor Hibdige's garden. So first of all, Trevor, I've been reading your posts on the internet for a long time now. And I understand that you're a petrochemical engineer by trade. You must have some views on the ethanol that they're putting in our petrol these days and what it seems to be doing to classic cars.
Yes, ethanol is useful for a lot of things. Drinking, I think, is probably the most popular activity with alcohol, but we've started adding it to fuels. The reason is it contains its own oxygen, it scavenges the explosion, uh, but there are serious problems with storing it when you mix it with petrol and what it does inside the engine. Uh, Coupled with the fact that we're making most of our ethanol by stopping food production and growing stuff specifically to make ethanol. So that's a bit of a side effect of the industrial use of ethanol that doesn't really get broadcast. But what does it do in terms of sitting in the fuel? It's supposed to boost the octane number. It's supposed to boost the burnability of the fuel. It's supposed to reduce CO2 emissions. It's supposed to help all sorts of things. But we've been adding stuff to petrol for years. I mean, we used to add lead, which was a really good idea. It boosted the octane and affected children's brain developments, which we didn't find out for years. When we stopped using lead, we started using oxygenates. We used MTBE, methyl tertiary butyl ether. We've been adding lots and lots of different things, and now we've come up with ethanol. Uh, Ethanol as a chemical is fairly inert in terms of corrosion, but when it absorbs moisture, when it oxidizes, ethanol turns to acetic acid. Acetic acid is vinegar. If you stick your carburetor in a bucket of vinegar, things will start dissolving, things will start corroding, certain rubbers will start corroding. So in small concentrations, 5% ethanol we've been using for a while. Small concentrations, we didn't really notice the problem, but we're up at 10% ethanol now. Problem with that is that it's starting to eat the rubber of the fuel lines. If the fuel lines are not designed for ethanol, then they will perish, they will leak. We've had a few fires, I think, that have been broadcast on the Facebook pages of people whose Alpines, not just Alpines, bursting into flames because of fuel pipes. So there's a couple of buzzwords. The fuel pipes, if they're proper ones, have got a specification, SAE code written on them. The two numbers that we need to look for are R9 and R14. Until this ethanol issue, R6, and most people upgraded to R6 just 5 years ago. But R9 and R14 are the new specifications for the higher ethanol concentration. They are identical in terms of what they do. Everyone says use R9. R9 is a high pressure version of the rubber tubing designed for fuel injection systems. R14 is a lower pressure rated rubber hose that's designed for carburetors. So you can use R14 or R9, but you need to start replacing all your rubber hoses. You need to look at gaskets. You need to look at O-rings. There's even reports of aluminium, copper and brass being dissolved by the byproduct. The longer it stays in the petrol tank, the worse it gets because it's exposed to moisture in the atmosphere. It's exposed to oxygen from the atmosphere. So short of not using ethanol, we have to learn to live with it. The E10 ethanol that's common now in two-star petrol 95 octane, we shouldn't be using. E10 doesn't really run in our engines. You need to mess around with the timing, you get less power out of the explosion. The 99 octane fuels are generally E5. Esso, Petrol, they say in all but a couple of counties in the UK, they don't put any ethanol in their 99, but it's still labelled E5. So that's interesting. So what more can I say about ethanol? Don't use it if you can help it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, do you think they're going to go above E10?
Oh, definitely. There is a move afoot at the moment to increase it. The problem that exists is that petrol is made to a specification. We know about octane, but it has a boiling point range it has to comply with. It has something called vapor pressure, which is related to the volatility of the fuel. They make summer fuels and winter fuels with different vapor pressures. The problem they have at the moment, to sell E10, they have an exception to the British standard that you see written on the pumps. They actually have permission to exceed the vapor pressure of the petrol by 1 psi, so it can boil easier, because sticking ethanol in it makes the vapor pressure higher. The problem is if they make E15, it will not meet the specifications. So what is going on in America at the moment, they are trying to change the specifications so that they can sell E15. E15 is terrible in terms of how much power we can get out of it. You have to retune the timing on your engine. The mixture is affected with that much ethanol. I've seen E85 used on tracks in America, but they stick other stuff in it to get more power out of it. But yeah, E15 is coming. You heard it here first. It's just a question of how much lobbying the fuel companies have to do to get the specifications changed.
What do you think about mitigating the effects of it? I mean, I see all these different additives on the shelf, Etho mix and all the other things that we can put in. Are they worth adding?
I'm not convinced they all work. I don't have enough technical data to tell you which ones are good, which ones are bad. Fuel stabilizers, I've been looking at them from a chemical point of view. I'm a chemist and an engineer, and I look at what's in them and I think, well, how can that possibly work? The most common fuel stabilizer is a mixture of heavier hydrocarbons, so a light oil. And how that inhibits corrosion, I don't know. The best thing we can do is, if you're going to store your car, is make sure the fuel tank's empty and fill it up with fresh fuel when you start off again. Um, most of our tanks are degrading, corroding internally. I think all the paint came off of mine in one go and ended up in the fuel pump filter. That was a couple of years ago. I even posted a picture of that and said, look at the inside of my tank. And everyone's going, oh, mine was worse than that. But yeah, E15 is coming.
So for those of us that have lined the tanks with something that is ethanol proof, like the Pour
Pour
15
15,
or something
yeah.
like that, so I'm not expecting the lining of the inside of my tank to come off. Would you recommend storing it nearly empty, like you just said? Because we normally store ours nearly full because we think, well, we don't want too much air in there.
Yeah, the ethanol fuel absorbs moisture. Temperature goes up, temperature goes down, fuel tanks breathe. We don't have sealed pressurized tanks,
Right.
unlike modern injection systems. It's a pressurized or at least 100% sealed tank. So the tank breathes, it sucks in moisture when it cools down, and supposedly it doesn't expel that moisture. The more fuel you've got in it, the more fuel you have to ruin. So what do? whatever it was in there when I drove it into the garage or the last time I used it. So no, I don't take any precautions. I don't use stabilizers. I changed all the rubbers. I'm looking for corrosion. I know it's going to happen, but I don't know where.
Yes, but
The
you do
report,
use your car all year round. You're like me, don't you? A lot
I
of
keep,
Alpine,
I keep using it. Yeah.
yeah, a lot of Alpine owners will park their car up in the autumn and not go back until the spring. So it's going to have several months over that cold period.
Mm.
I mean, this is why I asked that question really, because
Drain the water out of the system, drain the fuel out of the system. It's now getting silly, put it up on blocks so
yeah,
that the tyres are protected.
yeah.
How
How
far do
far
you
do you go?
go?
Yeah, I agree with you. Okay, well, you make your mind up then, whichever you want to do. I think in future, if I was going to leave an Alpine for a period of months, I would probably take the fuel out, listening
Yep.
to what you've just said, or run the fuel right down before I put it away, maybe.
Yes. Go on a long drive.
In summary, it is probably a good idea to run the fuel level down before storing the car, to replace rubber hoses with R9 or R14 rated pipes, to replace vulnerable floats, seals, O-rings, etc. in carbs and fuel pumps, and then refill with fresh fuel when you bring the car out of storage and keep the fuel fresh. If you do this, you will minimise the chances of ethanol causing problems to your Alpine. A big thank you to Trevor Hibdige for sharing his expertise and knowledge with us.